Hi everybody, it's Mike here from The Art of Guitar. You probably noticed, but I've been buying less gear lately and buying more concert tickets. I just thought, it's one of those things that people talk about all the time, like don't just buy things, but experience things as well. And a lot of people talk about traveling when they bring that up, but for me, it's going to concerts. Well, it seemed like everybody I knew, pretty much everybody, had seen Def Leppard live over the years. And it's one of those legendary bands that I've never really gotten around to seeing. I'm sure a lot of people can relate to always hearing Def Leppard on the radio growing up and MTV as well, especially when Hysteria came out. I think Love Bites was on the radio or on the screen 24/7, or at least it felt like that. It reminds me of going to the school dance and being depressed because I had no girlfriends or no prospects of a girlfriend, and I'm looking around during that song and just seeing all these people like slow dancing, and it just kind of brings back all these crazy memories for me. I really wish I could go back in time and see them live during the Hysteria tour, because I remember seeing clips of it and I could see these green laser beams and it just looked really top notch. Obviously Hysteria is one of the most produced albums of all time, and I think their stage show kind of reflected that as well. It really seemed like a really great experience. Not to mention that Steve Clark was still alive and in the band at the time, and that album had like 5 or 6 #1 hits. I think it was crazy. Maybe not #1 hits, but they were definitely hits. Now, I hesitated a tiny bit when I saw that they were coming to the State Fair. So the Minnesota State Fair, it was on a Tuesday, and I thought, I would love to see Def Leppard in a stadium. That would be the best. But it's not like the State Fair doesn't have a great setup. It's just that when you see a concert at the State Fair, there's so many more steps you have to take to see the concert. I mean, you just have to plan things differently because the parking is insane usually, and you have to buy a ticket to the actual fair. It's hard to get through it without wanting to buy a bunch of food and, a bunch of other stuff. You have to get through all the people that are pushing carts and just walking erratically. You have to look out for the piles of horse poop from the horses walking by. Actually, we didn't see any this year. I looked it up and it said that in 2015, the average concert ticket for the State Fair was about $50. So I ended up spending $200 for each ticket, close to that. The show started at 7 o'clock, so we ended up getting a couple foot-long hot dogs. They were like $9 a piece. We could have got mini donuts, we could have got cheese curds, but I did not want to be at a concert feeling super bloated. The closer we got to the grandstand, though, the more it felt like old school days, because I started seeing more and more Def Leppard shirts. People kind of trying to live their glory days a little bit. You could tell they were wearing like the ripped up, torn up jeans. They had the white sneakers on. Some mullets were flying around. You just had a real feeling that people were like, yeah, this is kind of like a high school reunion for us. We're going to be living 1987 again. We got through the gates, and instead of going all the way up to the nosebleeds like I did for Rush, we actually stayed on the ground, so we had floor level, and they had all these rows of seats. So we had the left center section, and I was kind of disappointed when I sat down, not to be like super spoiled, but the seats were so crammed together that I literally I couldn't sit back, because if I did, our shoulders would be pressing against each other. Instead, I sat forward just to relieve the pressure of that. And I was thinking, man, I'm 6'2", and I weigh about 170 or so, and I was having trouble fitting in the seats. And I looked around, I'm like, how are people that are bigger than me fitting together? It's just crazy there. So State Fair, I know you want to cram as many people as possible into these seats, but it's not the 70s anymore. People's bodies have changed over the years. So I think we need to go a seat and a half now. It needs to be about that wide for people to be comfortable. Now, I forgot to mention, as we were walking in, I was pleasantly shocked, because the backdrop for the band that just started said Brother Kane, and I had no idea that was the band that was opening. I just thought it was going to be like an evening with Def Leppard. I was just like, man, Brother Kane. This brings me back to like the early 90s, because they had a huge hit right off the bat called Got No Shame, which is a great tune. Check it out. It's got like early GNR vibes. Got no shame. Well, I got no one to blame. So when the grunge thing started to happen, a lot of these type of bands just sort of faded out. But I feel like Brother Kane got their last couple licks in before they went down. I think it was around 94 or 95. When they knew that the industry was changing, they put out a song called Fools Shine On. I think it's actually called And Fools Shine On. and it's a really great tune. They ended up playing it at the show. It's one of my favorite moments of the whole concert. But what was cool about that was it had a little bit of the newer sound, you know, that was happening at the time, like the alternative scene, mixed with their roots. So throughout the entire Brother Kane set, there were people taking their seats, kind of shuffling around. You know, at the State Fair, it's really hard to just sit down and watch something. You kind of want to get up and move around as much as possible. But by the time their set was over, they pretty much won over the whole crowd. You know, they had a really great mix of playing older and newer songs, which was really cool because they're writing new music. And it seems like nowadays a lot of people think there's no point in doing that. So I really have to hand it to Brother Kane for still putting out new music and being creative. The two guitar players had gold top Les Pauls, at least that's what it looked like. It looked great with the two guitars right next to each other. I'm like, damn it, now I got to get a gold top. I'm going to blame them that I have to get one. They were a great opening act for Def Leppard because there's a little bit of that nostalgia because people knew, you know, at least two of their songs. They kept it moving. They didn't try to act like it was their show. So it was a really great job opening for Def. My timing was horrible because I knew I wanted to buy a Def Leppard shirt. I ended up getting this one. Love it. But I went up to go because I thought maybe I had a song or two before they played their final tune. So this is still during Brother Kane, but I thought I could run up and get a t-shirt really quick, maybe grab a beer, use the bathroom, run back and still see them play their final tune, which I assumed was going to be Got No Shame. Well, I got in line and I went to the shortest line possible, but it took forever to get to the front of the line. And by the time I got to the front, the lady in front of me started up a conversation with the other lady selling the shirts, and they were comparing sizes, and it just... I'm just getting all impatient. I'm like, come on, lady. And of course, they kick into Got No Shame as I'm standing in line to buy a t-shirt. And by the way, where we were standing, you couldn't even see the stage because there's this huge cutoff point. There's this huge wall between us. Then I look and the lady who's selling the shirts is folding it really nicely, putting it in the bag. I'm like, just throw it at her. We got to go here. But the band sounded great playing the last tune. By the time we got back to our seats, though, they were done and they were off the stage. So I completely mistimed all that. But Al and I decided to hang out by the sound crew a little bit because there's a fence and you could just stand around. But the security lady was like eyeballing us quite a bit because we're not supposed to do that. You're supposed to take your seat. But the seats were so crowded, I just didn't want to like squeeze in like a sardine any more than I had to. So we just sort of stood around a little while and we started talking to people, and it was a really cool atmosphere. Everybody was really chill. Speaking of security though, they were on top of things, you know? I mean, there's a lot of good reasons that they should be these days, but what happened was during Brother Kane, this girl had sort of a manic episode. I wasn't really sure what was going on, but she was walking around and she was, you know, grabbing at her clothes and stuff, and she seemed really freaked out. And all of a sudden there was like 20 security guards like all around her. And half the guys were looking around like, where's the person? You know, because they heard there was a disturbance. And then it turns out it's just this like young girl, and they're just like, oh, that's it. Okay, see ya. So they do not mess around at the State Fair, at least in the grandstand. If anything starts going down, they just swarm in. So Def Leppard had this thing called the pyro clock, and they put it on the screen, which is great because if you want to plan things out, you know, properly, unlike what I did earlier, you'll have time because it says 10 minutes and it counts down or whatever. And so people were running to use the bathroom, and I just thought that was a really good idea. One of my favorite things to do at concerts is to try to guess what the first song's going to be. And Def Leppard have so many hit songs, you never know. I was personally hoping they would kick in with Women. I know that's kind of a weird choice, but it's how they start Hysteria, and it's such a great lick for the intro. It's just so epic. But really, I told Al, I'm like, I think it's going to be Let's Get Rocked, because that just seems like an opener, you know? The band comes on, and all of a sudden you see all the lights that were in the stairway, kind of the risers going up to the drum kit, they start lighting up. And it kind of looked like something I would see in an old Kiss stage, which is really cool. They had all these visuals. You know, Def Leppard has always had like a futuristic kind of look. And so throughout the night, there were these really cool visuals on the screen. And, you know, it was still daylight out, so it kind of took away from the effect of the stage lighting. But what was great is just like when you go see fireworks on the 4th of July, as the sun got, you know, further and further down, the lights and everything just got more and more amazing. They started with Rock, Rock Till You Drop. So, you know, I was close. The word rock is in it, you know? I think their first 3 tunes actually had the word rock in it. Then they played Rocket, which is a great live song. It's one of the best live tunes because in the middle, there's that whole breakdown where they could just do all the cool lights, and I still wish they had the green lasers. But, you know, everybody was singing along with it, and I had to laugh because I don't really know what they say during the chorus. I thought I did, but still don't think it's right. When they say Rocket, yeah, I always thought it was I had no idea what they said. So I was just sort of faking that I was was singing the words, but supposedly it's Satellite of Love. It doesn't sound like they're saying that though. What do you think? And even if it was Satellite of Love, I don't want to believe that those are the lyrics to that part. It's pretty epic though how long the members of the band have been with the band. You know, Vivian Campbell was there, we had Phil Collin, we had the two Ricks, and of course Joe Elliott, who's been there since day one. I think it was him and Rick Savage there since 1977, which is crazy to think about. Could you imagine being in a band for almost 50 years? It just blows my mind. And they all looked pretty healthy, you know what I mean? They all look like they were in good shape. Phil always looks like he's in great shape. I think he does jujitsu and he lifts and stuff, so he's got that kind of crazy build going on. And Vivian looked like a complete rock star the whole night. He had the shades on, and Rick Savage had his patented, you know, cheek microphone, whatever you call that thing. I call it the Garth Brooks or the Britney Spears microphone. Also made famous by Kip Winger and Tony Robbins too. Then they kicked into Let's Get Rocked. So like I said, 3 songs with the word rock in it. You gotta love that. And you know, I always thought that song was a little cheesy. It felt like it was written to just be like a radio hit, but live it kicks ass. You know, they had the visuals, the lyrics on the screen, so it was a really cool combination. They kept playing hit song after hit song, and I kept thinking, I'm not gonna have a chance to go to the bathroom, am I? They played like Foolin', Armageddon It, Animal, and then frickin' Love Bites. It just would not stop. Sadly though, we couldn't really see Rick Allen too well from our seats. It was almost like he was covered up with all his drums. He was using like a V drum kit, and you know, they had a camera back there, so sometimes they would show him on the screens and then you could see him, but for the most part you just saw like his drumsticks from the top of the drums. It was weird. Or I should say drumstick, sorry. One of the highlights was when they played Let It Go. That song is such a great live tune. When they kicked into it, I'm like, oh yeah, this tune. If you ever listen to Quiet Riot's Mental Health, it's really the same verse. You got me hypnotized. The teacher says that I'm one big pain. And I know that Def Leppard came out with it first, and then I think a year or two later, Quiet Riot came out with their tune, but I just kept thinking, man, that's like the exact same melody and everything. I purposely didn't look at their previous set list from other concerts because I really wanted to be surprised, even though I was looking for a chance to run to the bathroom. Well, it finally happened, but it wasn't until Joe Elliott came out with a tiny acoustic guitar, and I'm like, okay, maybe this is the time to go. No offense, but they played this guitar and Two Steps Behind, and I like those songs, but they're not like on top of my list to hear, you know? If it was going to be a ballad besides Love Bites, I really wanted to hear Have You Ever Needed Someone So Bad, because that is a song that really connected with me. If you ever like are longing for somebody, that's like the tune that resonates. As I walked to the bathroom, I looked back and I saw, you know, how high up the seating goes. That's where I sat for Rush, and it just looked incredible from our viewpoint. My friend Al also took the time to go to the bathroom as well. So as we're heading back, it was so funny because I stopped just momentarily to use my inhaler, and the security lady came up and she's like, hey, you just got to keep it moving, you know? And I'm like, geez, I'm just stopping to breathe, you know? So that kind of shows you how tight that security was at the State Fair. But as Al and I walked back to our seats, we passed by the production area, and to the left of it was Brother Kane. So we went up and talked to him a little bit, shook their hands, and I took this picture. Then Def Leppard basically kicked us in the head with 3 insanely huge tunes: Bringing On the Heartbreak, Rock of Ages, and Photograph. The hits just would not stop, like I said. They also played Switch 625, which blew my mind because it's one of my favorite tunes actually, and it's an instrumental, and it's not one of those tunes that were a huge hit, but when they kicked into it, it just has such a rockin' riff. It's off the album High and Dry, and if you've never heard it before, I recommend checking it out. I tried to learn it once back in the day, but it was out of this horrible Def Leppard tab book. I actually did a whole video on this. I'll link it below, but yeah, it was not helping me. People used to always talk about, you know, whenever they saw Def Leppard in concert, that they used backing tracks all the time. And I was listening really carefully, and I thought, you know, if they were going to use backing tracks, they would probably use it for that wall of backing vocal sound that they get with Mutt Lange as their producer. And if you listen to any Def Leppard song, you know what I'm talking about. Just the backing vocals are just huge. And they blend together perfectly. But live, I could hear their individual voices all singing the harmonies. So I thought maybe they're not using the backing tracks for this. I could be wrong, but it just didn't seem like that as far as the main instruments or the vocals. They may have been using it for sound effects, but I cannot say that with certainty. I was also a little bit worried about Joe's voice because I've seen some videos where he was struggling to hit the higher notes. And what I noticed at this concert, at least, was that he was doing a great job going to his head voice whenever he had to. So he didn't really have the high screamy sound like he used to have. But he had more of a smoothness to his voice up high. And then if something went really high, he would drop low to a harmony or to an octave lower, and somebody else would take over the main part. So I thought they did a really great job, you know, intertwining the vocals to make it all work. They pretended that they were done, but they didn't play Pour Some Sugar on Me yet, so I'm like, there's no way they're not going to play that, especially at a state fair. They did, however, throw a curveball. They didn't come out and play a huge hit. They came out and played a song called When Love and Hate Collide, which I did not know of. You know, I'm a big Def Leppard fan, but I'm not a huge Def Leppard fan where I know all of their catalog. Growing up with High and Dry and Pyromania and Hysteria were pretty much the main albums, and then a little bit of, what was that next album called? Adrenalize. So that's kind of my wheelhouse, you know, anything beyond that, I'm just a little bit gray on. I didn't realize that they had done like a duet with Taylor Swift for that song, you know, the When Love and Hate Collide. That's interesting. I kept racking my brain, like, what haven't they played? It was kind of a game I was playing with myself the whole time. And then hit me. I was like, oh, Hysteria. And they actually reworked the intro to that. So it was a little bit different. I thought that was really cool because it's got to be easy to just fall and rest on your laurels, I should say, and fall back to what you're used to and just play the tunes the way people know them. But to change it up a little bit has to keep it exciting, especially after playing these songs live for so many years. And then, of course, they ended with their biggest hit, Pour Some Sugar on Me, which a lot of people despise, and I can kind of see why. You know, it was so overplayed back in the day. And then you go see almost any cover band and they're still playing that tune to death. But there's something about watching Def Leppard themselves play that tune. It just elevates it. I don't know if it's just all in my head because I'm like, that's actually them. But it just has this different feel when the actual band plays it. They said goodbye to everybody. And then it took a little while, but all of a sudden fireworks started going off. And I kept thinking, you know, maybe that was a bad timing thing. You know, because if they would have went off right at the end of the show, it would have been the most epic thing ever. But maybe somebody fell asleep at the switchboard or something, or maybe they were just supposed to wait a while. Maybe it was planned that way. But as we were walking away, we could still see the fireworks going off. So that was a pretty cool ending. I think they end most shows at the grandstand with fireworks, but I can't vouch for that. Afterwards, we knew we were going to have quite an adventure getting back to my truck, but you know, we took in a little bit more of the state fair offerings. Al got some fried pickles. I got this like sausage hot dog thing with all these peppers on it. It was great. We stopped at the arcade and I played a little bit of Miss Pac-Man, but then I ended up doing the punching machine because I always have to test myself. As long as I can get it over 800 points, I feel okay about myself. You got to be a little more vigilant though at the fair, you know, for anybody going in the future. When the darkness comes, it's almost like Castlevania 2. It's like things kind of change a little bit there. So as soon as it gets dark, I'm always kind of looking around a little bit more. But everything was fine. We made it to the truck just fine. The last shot that I got was one of the Ferris wheel, and I thought it looked really great. They've upgraded it over the years. You know, it never used to have all these LEDs and stuff, but it always looked cool. But for some reason, this night, it looked epic. And it was really great to go to the concert with Al because he loves Def Leppard so much, grew up with them. So he was so excited. We both felt like teenagers, you know, going to a concert, and it was a great vibe. So that's it, my first concert review from the Minnesota State Fair. Hopefully you enjoyed the footage, and if you've ever been there before, you know what I'm talking about when it comes to, you know, just getting, you know, that fair fever, if you will. You get there and the next thing you know, you just want to eat everything, and it's just crazy. And if you haven't been there before, I do recommend going to the Minnesota State Fair. I know we have one of the best state fairs around. I know I'm just biased, but a lot of people say that all around the country. So hopefully you enjoyed the review, and we will catch you at the next video. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Do us a big favor, yeah? Don't forget us, and we won't forget you.